Hello and welcome to Testify again. Today we are talking to Pastor Chris Jones. Pastor Chris Jones is a pastor at Ship of Zion in downtown Raleigh. I call him the street preacher. They have street church. And I think you will find his life story, his journey to salvation, and his type of ministry will be very inspiring and encouraging. I love the fact that he is into mission, he is into the people, he is into going into the streets and reaching those that need to be reached with no judgment whatsoever. So let's sit down and talk to Pastor Chris, Senior Pastor of Ship of Zion in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome, Pastor Chris. Hello, Pastor Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Miss Bess?
I'm
You doing good?
good. Thank you for coming on Testify to share your testimony with us. I'm so excited for people to hear your testimony and for you to share with us on today. Um, we're just getting started out. Like I said, you'll be my first male, but I hope that just opens the door and make more males comfortable to come on and tell their testimony because I know there's some out there with an awesome testimony to inspire other young men. So, Pastor Chris, I always start off my interviews with asking people, how was 2020 for you?
Well, 2020 was so many different things I could say about it. It was hard, but I think it was a time of great opportunity,
Hmm.
for ministers and churches to really step up to the plate. And so I would like to think that we did that, that we tried our best to step up to the plate. So it was very exciting. It was hard, but God brought us through.
Yeah, well, that's good, and the family's doing well, and so 2020 has passed us now, and we'll just be grateful for the things that we came out with.
Yes, ma'am. My family's doing well, and everybody's doing their thing. Children. One child just got hired in Chicago by Willow Creek as a children's pastor, writing curriculum for all the campuses. My
Wow.
baby girl is running summer camps in the church. My son is back and forth to Germany in the military, and my wife is doing bodybuilding. And through that time, she received her doctorate. So a lot of things going on in the Jones camp.
It sure is a lot of things going on in the Jones case. Well, let's talk about Pastor Chris. I know you you probably weren't raised up or grew up thinking that you were going to be a pastor. Or, I mean, some people do. Some people say I knew I was going to be a pastor when I was young, but did you feel that way?
No, honestly, didn't know I was going to be a pastor. Didn't want to be a pastor. Um, Not a thought in my mind when I was very young. I was made to go to church, like most
Mhm.
of us were.
Most of
I
us,
was made
yeah,
to go, and so kind of got in it, as the old songwriter says. It was the prayers that brought me here, and
yeah.
so I had a bunch of praying grandmothers and grand aunts that kept me close to the fire, even when I didn't want to be close, and it just brought me back around to it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. I think a lot of us was that way. We were raised in the church, but once we got old enough to make our own decisions, then we had to be covered by prayer because it won't nothing but prayer
Amen.
that got us through.
Amen.
So, tell me about the young Pastor Chris.
Oh boy, that's
Ah,
that's not a holy story.
that's
Okay.
not a whole. For most of us, it's not. Believe me.
you know, and and,
I
and, I,
like how
and, I,
you
and I-
always say, "I ain't always been saved."
that's right. You hear me say that,
Uh-uh.
and I like to make sure that people hear that, so that
Yes.
people are not there yet. They understand they too have opportunity to get there.
Right.
But the young Chris Jones, several aliases. Some people call me, family call me Chrissy Jones, and some people in the street call me Chuck, and just carried many different names. But came out of Brooklyn, New York, as a young boy. Um, Dad and mom, three siblings. It was four of us, four boys, all same father, same mother. Dad died in the house at the age of 29. He was 29 years old when
Wow.
he died, and I was 6 years old when my father died. But can and have very good memories of my dad, because at that time I was living in Brooklyn at a time in the 60s when Brooklyn was noted to be one of the worst cities in the country.
Hmm.
And on the weekends, we actually had to travel and stay with, cousins in Queen and Long Island just to get out of Brooklyn because of the things that were going on. Well, my father was a part of that stuff. And so,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And so, I have very troubled memories of, my childhood. But one thing I'll say is my father loved me. He loved me and my brothers in the only way he knew how. He took us everywhere with us, taught us what he knew, which wasn't all good stuff. But we loved our dad, and I remember my dad loved us. But when he passed away, mom didn't want to raise us in New York, 4 boys, and so she moved to North Carolina. Now, she was actually from South Carolina, but she didn't want to go way back down there, so
Right.
she stopped here in North Carolina. So here I don't have a whole lot of roots in North Carolina. Just me and my brothers, and my mom's sister moved here and her children. Here in Raleigh, and we grew up here in South Raleigh, which was still a bear in its own, growing up
Mhm.
here. But coming from New York, I held my own. But at that time, it wasn't me living a life of Christ. It was us struggling and trying to make it through. Mom working 2 jobs, grandma living in the house. And sometimes it felt like, you were raising yourself. You was doing the best you can. And I'm gonna tell you this though, I think I got the best mom in the world. She did and gave us everything she
Yeah.
could give us and supported us through it. And I think that was another way God was teaching, that he was watching over us through our mothers. And I think people really need to realize that that's why God gave us parents, right?
Right.
That we have that earthly people that watch over us. But I got into the street life and, dealing drugs and, was good at it. Here in the city, I
Your
was
daddy
very,
taught you well?
oh, he taught me well. My dad, and I had an uncle that came along, and
Mm-hmm.
so I did it good at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a young age, I started selling, drugs at about 17 years old. Um, in high school, my 11th grade year of high school, I bought my first car. My 12th grade year of high school, I bought a car off the showroom floor. I was moving very well. So
Rolling.
yeah, and so, but God wasn't on my mind. Wasn't thinking about Him. But I had grandmothers and grand aunts that every summer, even though my mom moved us here to North Carolina, every summer she would send us down to Nana's house.
Yeah.
And when we went to Nana's house in South Carolina, I remember those days. We get down there, and my Nana would be sitting on the porch with a towel across her lap, and that switch sitting right on top of that towel. And my mom wouldn't even stay. She'd drop us off and take off 4 hours, go back to her. She'd drive 4 hours, drop us, and go back.
You were
And
going
we
back to
stand,
her retreats.
yeah, and
It
we
was her
stand,
break time.
yeah, we stand in that yard with our luggage and look at our Nana, and she said, "Younger, come on in here." And we like, "Oh Lord, here we go." But that,
Your
that
mama
can
told Nana, do as you wish.
oh Lord, I think she went over and above. Yeah, and so we spent all of our days either working in Portwood, throwing Portwood when we were down there, logging, and with my grandfather who owned his own logging business, or in the cucumber fields or watermelon fields. And after that was over, you washed up. You remember them days? You washed up.
Watch out.
We washed up and we were headed to church, kicking and screaming, but we was going revival after revival. I think every day was revival then. I don't
I'm
think.
telling you, let's go, let's go. And you dreaded it. And certain preachers you didn't even want to hear. You were like, oh God, is he preaching? Scare you to death.
Yeah, some of them would scare you. You be like, oh my God. They would say stuff, you'd be in the church. And sometimes, we would go, and our church was in the woods. It was back in the woods. And they'd already be singing, and we would be riding the church bus. And we would get to the church. And sometimes it looked like the little church sitting up on those cinder blocks were rocking. Your mind, you remember the church was rocking. And you're
Yeah,
like,
the
oh
flow
Lord.
starts rocking.
Yeah. And then you start remember that point, all the bad things you did as you getting closer and closer to the church, and that fear start overcoming you, which I think is a good fear. In the beginning, it's not really a reverence fear of God, but it's a fear of being caught or being found out at
A
that point
fear
in
of
time.
knowing his power. You,
Yeah,
you you won't really under him and being following him, but you knew his power because of what you heard. And then please don't call me out. You
yeah.
don't point at me. Don't look
That's right.
at me. Don't
That's right.
call me out.
Don't put me on the mourner's bench. Don't sit me. Don't sit me over there.
Don't tap grandma's shoulder.
No, Lord. But in all honesty, in the little church there, most of everybody was, was my family, all Church of God in Christ people, real Pentecostal folk. Um, and at that time, it was like Marette Brown Clark, she's one of my cousins. She was there. This guy Alfred Open in New York that plays trumpet all over New York, and he's an attorney. All of them were there. Lamar Odom, those all those like my kinfolk. We were all
Mhm.
down in the South and sent there, and we would be terrified. But I thank God for that upbringing because what happened during my time of coming up, you never forget those times. Just like we're able to laugh and talk about them now, and
Yeah.
those are the times that made us and got us where we are.
Hmm.
So as I moved through my seasons, even when I came back, would come back to Raleigh, I was still just as wild as anything. But the truth of the matter was, I had limitations because of what my nana. When some things people would do,
Yeah.
I'd go so far, but I wouldn't. I'd be like, oh no, 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 because I had that limitation
Yeah. You
that
had that
stopped me.
foundation.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
had that foundation, which I also noticed guys that were around me that didn't go to church didn't have that. And
Hmm.
they were like a loose puppy just got let off the chain. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, what's wrong with that guy? And I would understand, oh, he don't go to church. I knew that. I knew that he had no boundaries.
You
They
didn't
had
have a nana like I had.
he didn't have a nana like I had because I was just as scared of my nana as I was the church.
They didn't play. They did
They
not
didn't play.
play.
No, but one thing I do know, even as I got older and I would drink and come home, even in South Carolina, I would go back down there. And no matter my nana, she didn't play and always made us go to church. But one thing I always wanted a double portion of what my nana had. She would always tell me how much she loved me. She would always tell me how much she loved me. And I make sure I do that in my church. And I tell people all the time that I love you. So you have to practice. My nana taught me that you have to practice love. You have to practice that. You
Hmm.
have to continue to say it until you build it in your spirit and understand that you can love everybody. Now, you might not like everybody, just
Hmm.
like my nana didn't like the things that I did. She didn't like them, but she
Right.
still loved me. And she taught me that. My nana's passed away a few years back, and I actually closed her coffin and closed her, tucked the covers around her. And that was so meaningful for me, to
Yeah.
do that and then be able to carry on, her legacy and what I'm doing today.
I
But
think it's so hard because there's a lot of black families. I don't know if it's our culture or just the way a lot of us don't express that love. A lot of people can say, I wasn't raised up where people verbally said, I love you all the time, or, people were hugging you all the time. It just was absent in a lot of homes.
yeah, it is.
And so when we became adults, we had to try to start something new because we felt the experience of living without it.
Yeah. And so I definitely I do that and I practice it and I think we need that in our culture more now than ever before.
Yes.
Just to tell people I love you. I had a gentleman tell me, and all my men in my men ministry and the new guys in the church, when I talk to them, when I get off the phone with them, I make it my business to say, bro, I love you. I love you. And I said so much. So one guy, he called me back one day and he said to me, he said, you know what? He said, by you always saying that, you taught me to be able to tell other men that I love them. You taught me that, man, just by
That's
you saying,
hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's hard for men to do, And
Yeah.
so you want to break those barriers. And sometimes it's like Christ does, how in the Bible, how he go over things over and over, repetition throughout the Word of God. You see it over and over in one gospel and the next gospel because those repetitions help you to practice and help you to
Yeah.
remember it and help you to repeat it. And so that's why I try to say it over and over to them so they get in their spirit. And then when I hang up the phone on them, they're saying it back to me.
Yeah.
And prayerfully that's resonating and they're saying it to their children. They're
Yeah.
saying it to other men in their presence that they say, bro, I love you, and maybe that'll resonate down to our young people. They start loving each other and stop hating on one another. But we got to
Yeah.
start it somewhere.
Yeah. You got to start somewhere. You definitely
Yeah,
have to start
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah.
So, you how long were you in the streets? I mean, your 20s, your 30s, your
Well,
40s?
yeah, honestly, I came out when I was 27 years old. And I was young because I'm 55 now. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm 55 now. And so I've been running with the Lord for a long time. But, I had an experience through my drug dealing time and all that. Always could, get out of going to jail. I always had the money to, to finagle around it, try to put kingpin charges on me. I've been busted for that, you name it. I've been through it. And, um, and so I did get in some trouble and I ended up having to do some weekends. Um,
Oh,
and I did some weekends. And at that time, I had just not long before that had met my now wife. Dr. Jacqueline Jones. I had just met her, and she wasn't really understanding things I was doing. She was from, from the county, and she didn't. And I'm just city boy. Yeah, I'm from the other side, and I think she was more excited with me than in love with me.
Looking at the bad boy, the good girl looking
Yeah,
at the bad boy, but kind of like, wait a
yeah,
minute, you gonna wear
yeah,
this again?
yeah. And so I had to do those weekends, and I told her, I said, hey, I got to do weekends in jail. She's like, what in the world, She wasn't understanding. I said, so when I go to jail, I had this little system. Now, I did go to jail a few times, never to prison. Well, I went to prison once. I may tell you about that. But anyway, I go to jail. I said, hey, at that time, they didn't have the cameras. You'd have, when you go see somebody, you physically see them. So I said, if I got to do these weekends, I go in on Friday, and I have to sit down there on Friday all night. So if you pop up there Saturday morning and see me, they'll bring me back down. So I spend all my time coming downstairs, going through that, and I get down and sit with you, and then stay there for a while. Then I go back upstairs. And then by that time, I go to sleep, wake up, it's Sunday, I'm out. You've helped me do that little time. She didn't come.
Not the girl from the side.
No, she like,
going down there.
Yeah, she like, I'm not doing that. And I would call her,
going down there. You on your own.
Yeah. And I would call her and ask her, like, where are you? She'd be like, I'm at Walmart. I'm not coming down there. I was like, so we still have that running joke now. I'm like, if I get in trouble, I know where you're going. You're going to Walmart. You're going shopping. Yeah. But anyway, I was in there. And when I was, I've never been, now, honestly, I've never been like a drug addict. I've never been, I drank alcohol, I smoked marijuana, but I just quit doing that. I just didn't like being paranoid. I'm somewhat still a control freak of my own life, other than letting Jesus Christ have his way in my life. I don't like no substance or anything controlling me, and that's what got me from stopping even getting high, because I didn't like being paranoid. But when I was in there, I remember one morning I woke up and this guy came and sat at a table with me. I wouldn't even remember him now. I would like to say it was an angel that came in there and visited with me. And he sat there and he said, and I was kind of upset, a little vicious acting in there. He said, hold on, man, I just want to talk to you. I said, brother, go ahead on, man. Don't come on, I'm trying to run them off. He's like, no. I need to say something to you. He said, I'm not a spiritual man. He said, I'm not. He said, but I want to tell you something. You don't belong in here. I can look at your skin. Bruh, look at these guys in here. Look at you. He said, there's something different about you. He said, I just want to tell you that, man. I don't want you to end up like me. He said, bro, you don't belong here. I was like, man, go ahead, don't go, And he left. And that night I went and I got on my bunk and I lay there and I thought about that thing. And I remember my Nana. I remember my Aunt Samela. I remember how hard my mama was working to raise us and do the best she could for us. And my mama never brought another man in the house the whole time she was raising us. She respected us, that she wouldn't have another men in and out the house. My mama, I don't even know if my mama even dated. She dated somebody that we didn't know it. My mom was like that, And so that's all that started coming to me. And one thing I like to share with people, with your children, I know we believe in beating them and all that kind of thing, but the greatest thing you can instill in your child is having them where they don't want to disappoint you.
Right.
They can take a whipping, but that disappointment, if your child feel like, I don't want you to disappoint me, baby. I want you to do well. And they have that thing in them that they don't want to disappoint you. Now that's a whole different game. And that was instilled in me, that I didn't want to disappoint my Nana and my mom. And I started thinking about it. No, this is not me. This is not where I belong. This is not what I do. And so I got out that weekend. And when I got home, I told Jacqueline, I said, hey, I'm going to church. She said, you doing what? I said, yeah, I'm going to church. She said, so what are you going to do about all the stuff you got in the house? I said, I'm not worried about that. I said, I got to go to church. So that very next Sunday, I got out that Sunday, very next Sunday, I went to a church. At that time, I had a bald head, earrings in my ear, gold chains in my neck. I was a different person, a totally different person. And I went to a church. When I walked in, the people looked at me very strangely. It caused me to go back into our kind of mode. I'm like, what do these people think they are? It just didn't feel good to me, right? I'm like, nah, this is not what Nana told me about. This is not the love. This ain't it. So I left, and she said, I told you, it won't them. It's just you. She said, no. So the next Sunday came. She said, where you going? I said, I'm going back to church. She said, you going back to that same church? I said, no, I'm going to another church. So I went to this little church. Wasn't many people in there, but they had the drums and the guitars and all that kind of stuff. People weren't paying you no attention because they were praising God. Yeah. So for me, it was like the club. It was just like when I used to go to the club, So I'm like, okay, I like this. And so I was in there, and the lady got to preaching. This is the first time I went. And she came down the aisle, drums going, everybody shouting. She stopped everybody, stopped right beside me. And she said, The Spirit of God told me to tell you to come here 3 more times. And she got them back to shouting and praising. They went back to praising. I'm sitting, I'm like, what's wrong with talking about? So I'm back praising. So I go home, I go back to church. I'm liking the church. I'm going back. And one Sunday I get up and get up and get ready to get in the prayer line. And Jacqueline is pulling my jacket. Where you going? Where you going? Sit down, sit down. I said, no, I'm gonna get prayer. I'm gonna get, because I hadn't done it. You know, that I used to, when I was a little boy, I knew it. And so I'm going up and getting the prayer line, and she praying for people, they falling out, all kind of stuff. And I'm getting nervous and more nervous and nervous. But when I got closer to her, something kind of came over me and tears started coming up my eyes. I'm not a crier, but tears started coming up my eyes. And I got to her, she stopped them again. She said, boy, what is it that you want? What is it that you want from God? And I told her, this thing about salvation is real. I want to be saved. She said, well, hold on.
Lord.
Hold on, hold on.
Hallelujah.
I can't never get past this part. I don't know if I tell this. But she said, I'm not going to pray for you. And she took me and pushed me to the side. Immediately, I'm like, what in the world? She told the elders in the church, she said, pray for that boy. That boy going to be saved today. Yeah.
So right here, Pastor, we're going to take a break. We're going to come right back.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're going to go from salvation from the
All right.
out
Amen.
to freedom. Okay, so we are back, Pastor Jones, Pastor Chris, and we are at that altar. And she has
Yes.
pushed you away and said, I am not going to pray for you.
Yeah.
And what was the first thing went through your mind when she said that?
I was thinking to myself, oh, this is just like anything in the world or anything else. You know, I'm thinking, push me away. Once again, I'm getting pushed out. So I got to go do what I got to do to take care of me. I'm thinking that. But then she told the men in the pulpit, the elders, she said, pray for that boy. That boy gonna be saved today. And they got around me and they began to pray. Now, I'm not one to always say I hear the voice of God. You know, people scare me with that. I'm like, you always hear the voice of God. Your life should be so much better than what it is. So I'm not that guy. And so, but yeah. So at this time I did, and I didn't hear it like in a voice. It was like through the pores of my body that I heard the Lord say to me, you've been looking for a father, and I've been here all the time. And I was saved that day. And what it made me realize is I was doing all the bad things I was doing because I didn't have a father growing up, never, other than when I was 6 years old, never ever called a man dad. Don't even know what that's like, you know. That God was saying I was trying to prove myself, you know, to the world,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that I didn't need that. I don't need that. I'm good like I am. But God let me know he was that in my life.
Yeah.
I had that, and I had that in him, that he was watching him the whole time. The thing was, I didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
But that day, I came to the realization
Mm-hmm.
that I had a heavenly father that cared about me. And I've been running for God ever since.
Yeah. So what did Jacqueline do while she was sitting out there looking at you?
Well, she wasn't looking. What happened is the ladies went down to her.
Oh.
And they began to, they were wrapped around her,
They double
ministering to
teamed
her.
y'all.
Yeah.
That's how they did it in the old church. They double teamed.
Yeah.
They care what you
Yeah.
thought or think. This is what we can do today.
Yeah, and they did, and she truly rededicated her life to Christ, and we at that point began to run for the Lord, and so from that point, I just knew. I stayed in, I shouted for a while, and I ran for a while, but then the shout wasn't enough, the run wasn't enough. I wanted to know who God was. I needed more. And I love them all to the day. I will always, those pastors, that pastor, that bishop, I love them. They passed away now, but I love them with everything in me for what they did for me.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't they couldn't take me to that next place. It just wasn't there in that church. And
Mhm.
so I left that church. Actually, at a service one night, there was just a little Methodist pastor in all her Methodist garb with the gown and the little hat. And about 80-year-old lady came in there after a service we had one night at that church. And she said to me, the Lord sent me for you. And I was like, ma'am. And she had a little slip of paper with her number on it and where she wanted me to come. And I called her and she said, told me to come. And the next day I went and she was running this center in South Raleigh where she was feeding people, taking care of people and teaching the word of God. But when I got there, she was teaching, but I was the only pupil in the daytime. In the daytime, it was me and her sitting at a table. Sometimes she would bring other pastors around me, and they was pouring into me, teaching me. And then she would say, well, go in there and fix that food and take it down to the homeless people in the woods. Don't give it to them, let them eat till you pray for them. And so I would be all down the woods in South Raleigh, feeding people. I remember the guys, I'd take them food and there'd be little creeks running back there. They'd catch little bitty brims and then they'd be cooking them and they wouldn't eat them until I prayed. I was a young Christian then. But they wanted me to pray. And then she got me walking neighborhoods and, ministering to people, giving out food. And, when it was cold, we gave out socks and those kind of things. And then she had a radio program called The Hour of Power on WAUG.
Mhm.
And one day she told me, she said, I want you to go on the radio with me. And I was like, nah, I don't. And it was live. Radio was live. You have no dead air time or nothing. And so I went on there the first time with it. I was so excited. And we went through that thing and we worked. And then she kept taking me back. And then one day she called me. She said, well, Chris, I'm not going anymore. You do the broadcast. I'm like, man, it was 30 minutes of live broadcasting, preaching and teaching for 30 minutes. And I was doing it. I started doing it and I was doing it. I fell in love with it. I was doing it. And then she would have me do certain little things in the church. And then one day she told me, she said, well, um, let me tell you, God has a call in your life. And she said, so you need to set up your initial sermon. She said, baby, you already been preaching. She said, you do it all the time. You do it out in the streets. You do it to people you meet. She said, you do it on the radio. We need to set it up. I was like, no, ma'am.
Mm-mm.
No,
Not
man,
me.
that's not me. I love doing this work. I love helping people. That's what I want to do. She said, well, you continue to do that. You don't have to pastor anything, but just do your initial sermon, get it done. That kind of, I said, okay, we'll do it. And she set it up. I'll never forget it, Mount Sinai Church on Swain Street here in Raleigh. Pretty good sized church. And when she set it up, the church was packed out. Some of the smaller news people were there. I still got the articles at home. It was packed. And I preached a message from the prodigal son, right? I preached from there. But I was talking about my life, how
Yeah.
God had brought me in, how I got to that point where I was down so low, but then I came to myself, and I told them my testimony, that thing, and it really blessed. So after that, I traveled her to Alabama, and we started churches in Alabama. I mean, she had me wide open running. And we spent time with Benny Hinn. I'd been down to Brownsville Revival and all of those kind of things. And so I did that. And so then I stayed with her for a while. But then I even wanted more. So I said, I want to go to school. She kind of got upset with me, and I didn't understand that, but she wanted to be the only one to teach me.
Oh.
It taught me a lot, and I understood that, but I wanted to go to school. So I enrolled at Shaw University. And she got so mad with me, yeah, that I ended up having to leave the church. And it was because I went to school and she didn't want me to. And so I went to school, I went to Shaw, and I was there and I worked nights. I had a job that I had been on for 21 years, and I worked nights there. And I was going to daytime with students. I couldn't do that. Those students would drive me crazy. And so I started going to this other church in Fuquay, and they had a school there, a school of ministry called Nelson, New Life Community School and Bible Institute, which still goes on today. And so I went and I talked to the bishop, told him I was at Shaw. He said, we're accredited. I give you the same degree, that kind of. I said, okay, well, let me transfer down here. He said, we have all adult education. It's all adults here. And so I went to New Life and went to school and got my degree there. But then I stayed there for a season and worked with Bishop, and I was doing outreach ministries and all kind of stuff. And so Bishop would do tent revivals, and I would always, because my granddaddy in the logging, I could swing a hammer, I could swing a maul, and so I would always go with him and set the tent up. Whatever Bishop asked me to do, you want me to plant trees, Bishop? Whatever you want me to do, you want me to paint walls? That I'm your guy. I don't. You gotta give me nothing. I don't want nothing, Bishop. I just want to work in the kingdom. I'm not going back to the
Right.
streets. And so I worked with him. Planting trees, all that kind of stuff. And so he said he was going to Suitland, Maryland. He said, we're going to Suitland, and Minister Jones, I need you to go because I don't know how they got their tent up, and I need you to set the tent up. So you drive me. And so all the other ministers there, and New Life was a pretty big church. This was back in the 90s. And at that time, Bishop had about 600 members, and they'd be about 500 in attendance. On Sunday morning, we was a large ministry at that time,
Mm-hmm.
And so he had all these other ministers that gonna fly up to Maryland, the following week to help him. We slept 2 weeks. Now, one thing Bishop believed in is that we slept out at the tent. We never went in nowhere. We slept at the tent. We didn't eat no meat. We fasted the whole time we were there. So Wednesday night came, and the guy was supposed to fly up. He called him and told him, don't come. And I'm standing there, I'm cleaning up around. And he says, I can hear them kind of arguing back and forth. Bishop said, well, I got Minister Jones up here, and he going to start preaching tonight. I'm like, who are you talking about? I'm like, who's he talking about? Yeah, I'm like, who's he talking about? And so he did, and he came to me, he said, look, I want you to preach tonight. So put the broom and stuff down and go in the tent over there and study. I said, Bishop, I don't think I can do it, because at night it was like 300 people coming to that tent. We in Suitland, Maryland, in the hood of Suitland with the tent up, gunshots, all that kind of mess. Wasn't far outside of Andrews Air Force Base. And so that night I preached a message. The message was called, What's in Hell That You Want? And so I was asking people, why are you trying so hard to go to a hell that wasn't created for you? And I came from the story of the rich man and Lazarus, how the rich man was in hell, and he was asking Abraham to allow Lazarus to go back to tell his family, they ought to do right. He don't want him to come there because he's being tormented. And so I went through that thing. Well, the next day, the people from Andrews Air Force Base sent some guys in and wanted my social security number and all that. I'm like, Bishop, what they want that for? I said, well, they know something about me. I'm going to jail. What a Bishop said, don't worry about it. And so, yeah, I thought I'm going to jail.
Well, Christian, I ain't always been saying that.
That's right. I'm like, wait a minute.
Everybody.
Yeah. And so they came back and got me that Friday and took me on Air Force One. They were so touched by the message. They said, we're going to take you somewhere that you'll probably never meet anybody has been. And they took me on Air Force One. And I went there, and I'm going, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so we go, and they put gloves in my hand. They put little booties on. I couldn't have no cameras on me or nothing. And I'm walking through. I'm seeing all the pilots. I'm going through the building. And I come out, and there's Air Force One. I'm like, oh, my God. And all these military guys around, they salute when I come in there, and I walk up the steps. And when I got to the top of the steps, I'm just trying to cry again. I got to the top of the steps, and the guy said, I want you to turn around because you're standing in the most powerful place that the greatest leader in the free world will ever stand. And I turned around, he said, and I waved, and I waved. And I stood there for a minute, and I went on in there, and I walked to Air Force One. I got to the bathroom, and I told him, can I go in there and sit down? He said, why do you want to sit there? I said, to sit down where presidents do their most thinking. I ain't going to use it. Just let me sit there. And I
want to see everything, okay?
Everything. And so when I came out, I asked him, I said, can I pray on you? Can I pray? All of them started looking at one another. They said, we've had all kind of dignitaries, all kind of people. Nobody has ever come on here and asked us, could they pray? They said, well, can I ask, why would you like to pray? I said, because if this is the most powerful place that the most powerful man of the free nation stands, I need to pray for him, our nation, and I had to begin to pray. But that was an experience, But after that, after I left, I came out, and I stayed with Bishop for some years, but that's when we birthed, and I got credentialed under my bishop. I got credentialed. I got my degree under him. I was assistant pastor in Trenton, North Carolina for about 1.5 years. And that trip was just killing me. And I came back and I told Bishop, I said, I think I need to go back to Raleigh. And so I came back to Raleigh. When I got back to Raleigh, we started doing little Bible studies. And one day, Dr. Jones, Jacqueline, she said to me, she said, the Lord has spoken to me. It's time for us to start. I said, start what? She said, we need to start our ministry. And I looked at her and I told her, if we start, I'm never stopping. Never. So you better be sure it's God. And she said, I am. And so then we started having church services at our house. It wasn't 1 month, our house was full of people. So we moved into a building. We got in that building. The building we were in, it was an old, very old building. We stayed in the building. Everybody thought, we weren't going to be able to stay. We stayed in the building for 13 years.
Wow.
God bless us in the building we are in now. And neither one of the buildings did we have debt, did we owe anything. God always made a way out of no way because of the kind of ministry that we do. We do ministry because I hear in the book of Matthew, I think it's chapter 5, where God talks about what you've done to the least of these, you've already done unto me,
Right.
and that scares me. Right? When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. When I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When? When did we do that, Lord? What you have done to the least of these, you already done to me. And I
Right.
think a lot of ministries and churches forget that. We get caught up in the shout and the praise and how great our pastor is, how nice our church is, and we forget about the mission that Jesus called Peter on. When Jesus went away and he came back, he said, "Where's Peter?" And when Peter came, he asked Peter, and what he was asking Peter, "Did you forget the mission?" He said, "Peter, do you love me?" Peter said, "Yes, Lord." He wanted Peter to remember all that I taught you.
Yeah.
I taught you to fish after men, and you went back to fishing after fish. You went back to doing what you were doing. You were satisfied. You was happy with that. You walked me. You was glad about it. You knew that. Just like the church, we glad we come to know Jesus, and then we just kind of go back to doing our own thing and go to church on Sunday morning. But that's what Jesus asked him, Peter. He asked him again, "Peter, do you love me?" He said, "Peter, then feed my sheep."
Right.
If you love me, how are you going to show me you love me if you're not taking care of my people? The
Right.
people I call you to, I don't care if they're crack addicts. I don't care if they're prostitutes. I don't care. These are still my people.
Right.
How are they going to know about you if you don't go? How are they going to learn you don't go? And everybody's not going to walk in the church. And most people that walk in the church already know Jesus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's when we started Ship Zion Church and our nonprofit Ship Outreach. And in this city now, we feed over 3,000 families a month from our outreach. We have a nonprofit grocery store that we have about 500 people visit a week. We have a gym that we have I think it's about 100 people that visit that gym a week. That's going there, get nutrition. And what we try to do is fill gaps in people's lives. Anything they say that why they can't get to Christ, why I can't come to Jesus, we try to fill those gaps.
Right.
Nutrition. If you're not eating good, we're gonna make sure you eat. Then we can talk to you about Christ. Because there was a man once said he went to Africa, and when he went there, he said he was trying to minister to an African, and the African guy said, "I can't hear you ministering to me over my stomach growling." Right? And so we got to make sure that people are fed and got the things that they need. That it's easier for them to get to Christ.
Right. That's like your mission, to love people where they are and encourage them to
Bro,
grow a relationship with Christ. I just love to see your street ministry, because when you say street ministry, you are in the streets.
yes,
Like
man.
on Halloween, you were in one of the worst parts of Raleigh, walking the streets, looking out for the kids on Halloween by yourself.
By myself, yes, ma'am. And what I do is I take candy out. Some churches, why you participate in Halloween? They ain't a Christian holiday. Well, most holidays we celebrate. And if you really do the studies, they're not Christian holidays. So I tell people, hey, leave me alone with that mess until you go study. And so my thing is I just want to make sure that our kids in my area of influence, because God gives us our area of influence and people that we're accountable for, right?
Yeah.
And because we're called, when people tell me, Pastor Chris, I want you to talk to me about this because I think God has called me. I like some call to what? Call to preach. I said, preach to who? They said, well, from the pulpit, I'm supposed to. I'm like, I don't believe that. That's not my theology. I don't believe that. I believe God called you to a body of people.
Yeah, to a territory.
He called, that's right. It's some people that when he called Moses to be a deliverer, he didn't call Moses to be a deliverer to a mountain. He called him to be a deliverer to people. There was a body of people that needed to hear about God and be rescued, right? And so therefore, when God calls us, he called me to this body of people. And honestly, I had the zip code area in my head and everything of where I was supposed to go and win the territory for the Lord, right?
Right.
And go in and win those people. And so when I first came in the area, people said, well, Pastor Chris, you're going to need a church van to, bring people in there. And I said, no, I don't. I'm going to win the people that are there.
Yeah.
I'm those people that are there.
So what about the territory that you're in now? Is the dynamics is changing,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
territory around the church. So what do you think about that? How are you going to deal with that? Or are you going to try to include that in?
Yeah, well, let's use the word gentrification, right?
Yeah, I know that word. I was like, I'm going to use it, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want to mispronounce it. But
So
I knew you would know what I was talking about. I call it. It's to me, it's just like red zoning back in the '60s.
Right. But here's what I say. So it's just my spill on gentrification. Nobody get on and blast me for what I'm about to say. But I've traveled to Mississippi to see gentrification, Memphis, Tennessee, Atlanta to see how it's operating. I went to Chicago to the Lawndale community, one of the worst communities in America. I went there to see how they were doing gentrification, moving people out and
Mhm.
tearing down the projects and all that kind of stuff. And I saw it. Well, gentrification, it is about color and race because but it's more so about economics. It's about money, right?
Right.
And so even when you look at people say, why is there so much black on black crime? I would say that's the wrong question, because crime, it festers in poverty or impoverished conditions. You
Mhm.
go to many countries wherever impoverished conditions are, people are killing each other, that kind of thing. In the United States of America, the question is not why are so many black kids killing one another, it's why are so many black kids in poverty. That's the
Right.
question. If you get them out of poverty, then that will stop, right? And so we can handle that. But gentrification comes along and it kind of just shuffles and push people around. But what we try to do, we try to do what we call, what I've learned through my travels and through some Christian community development things that I've learned, is we try to do gentrification with justice. And people say you need to stop it, but the only thing to stop gentrification is money, right? It's economics, it's money. Big money comes and do that, right? So how do we do it with justice? So you work with the builders that are coming in, right? You advocate for those of them that want to stay in the neighborhood, that to help them stay. Believe me, there's some people in the neighborhood that need to go.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, but you try to advocate. And then even in this neighborhood, there's been at least 10 houses that I got, companies to come around and help refurbish and help give curb appeal, do roofs, go inside and redo so the city won't come in and hit them with all these fines and those kind of things for people that want to stay. And we did that free of charge. And
Yeah.
so we call that gentrification with justice. Now, as the new people are moving in and slowly happening, what we're doing is we're taking our reach out further to where our people are going. So when our target area was 276 01, now we're moving into 27610. Not that we move the church, but we start reaching out further in the South Raleigh area to even reach more people and help them get the resources that they need. Now, our thing is anyway, is not to stay here where we are. That was never our plan anyway,
Okay.
right? So once you win a
Glory.
territory, yeah, so once you get a territory, it's just like they did in the Old Testament, they carried the church. It was a tent. They carried it. So it's time for us to pick up our tent
Mhm.
because I think we're supposed to do here in this neighborhood, and so we need to move our tent. So
Yeah.
it's not for me so much as gentrification. For me, is we've been here. 80% of our church came from this neighborhood. On our road, we got about 1,000 people on our road. A lot of them have moved out of the neighborhood, living in apartments, got houses now, are driving cars, got jobs now. We won the territory, and I'm
Yeah.
excited about it. And
Yeah.
so now I want to expand that even further out. So I would not along with our church and our nonprofit, which our nonprofit is doing very well now. I'll just give you this. There's a thing called a nonprofit Shark Tank. They go to North Carolina and they go through all the nonprofits and choose three to go on the nonprofit Shark Tank. And you'll go up against other nonprofits and you'll win and you get a certain amount of money. But everybody going there because it's nonprofit, everybody get money.
Mhm.
Well, our organization was chosen, and right now I'm going through the screening and all that. I was at practice last night to go in a nonprofit Shark Tank. So I tell people out there that's doing ministry, and they
So
always
that's
try.
your which ministry? Which part of your ministry or nonprofit one, or is it just the whole church
My
that?
whole nonprofit. Now my
Okay.
church is separate. Now the church is separate, Ship Zion Church. My
Right.
nonprofit is Ship Outreach and Community. So
Okay.
that's a separate 501c3. That's with my gang intervention strategies, my grocery store, our gym, our warehouse, those things, and our trafficking, which we just initiative that we just implemented and hired a director for. And so all of that is up under the umbrella of our nonprofit, where we're touching people in the city. And so we're going to go in there. We practiced last night with the guys that were running the show and all that stuff. And it's going to be in 3 months, but they're getting us prepared for it.
Mhm.
There's going to be a lot of donors that'll come around it. But our nonprofit is doing very well. I'm excited about what it's doing. And it's growing to a point where we are reaching further than just this zip code area.
Right.
And our thing is to get it to where it can be duplicated and that other people can take it into other cities, all the tentacles that we have up on
Mhm.
our umbrella and take it into other cities and duplicate it.
Right.
Somebody told me, said, well, Pastor Chris, you're going to have to write a book in order for that to happen. I said,
Well, I mean, you got your pilot program, so you got to have some guidance and instruction for your pilot program of how it
that's
works.
right.
I
Yeah.
think you do so much in that community. and on the streets that the other big churches around don't reach that point, of going actually to the street where the people are and meeting the people where they are. That's so impressive,
Yes,
because like you said, the church is not in those four walls. And I think that if people didn't learn that in 2020, then they're never going to get it.
right. So I would say this. So even the larger churches around here, I know all the pastors. I love every one of them, and all of them have their different ministries, and I understand that. In 2020, when that happened, we were the leaders in the city of distributing food before 2020. We were out all the time. Other churches was watching us do it and that kind of thing. But what I thank God for, and I'm going to say it boldly, is that when that hit and we were still serving food,
Yes.
other churches stepped up to the plate. I saw other churches. And so what I did, I purposely, they don't even notice, I purposely drew back our food ministry until I just started serving hot meals. I wasn't giving out food boxes and those kind of things. I got a warehouse full of it, but I wanted to back off. And I said, Lord, this is a kingdom thing. If they're doing it now, I can give food to them. And some of them were calling me, Pastor Chris, can you get us meat here? I got you. I got you. And I was supplying those churches because I love all churches. I love them. So I started supplying them with food and watched them develop. And I said, okay, they got it now. They got it. And those pastors were so excited, about seeing their people that had never gone out and didn't do those things before. They were beginning to do it. And I was like, yeah, this is kingdom mindedness. This is it. Where the Big C church is one church. And I thank God they started doing it. We were collaborating. When we got the COVID shots, I was called by Wake Med and went down and met with this doctor. And she said, Pastor Chris, how many churches can you get that we can rally around? And I can get COVID shots. We can give them out to people 65 and older at the churches that we can reach them where they are. We got 17 churches and gave out 17,000 shots. And I was like, man, but it was just churches. Yeah, it was just churches coming together and working together. And I love my fellow brothers. And we all just have different ministries. And I understand that. I understand the call, that I have on my life, which is a very dangerous one.
Yeah, but it's unique, but it's needed. And it requires certain people. So
Yes,
now or you can contribute your days in the street.
Yes, ma'am.
It gives you the courage and the wisdom to go where you have to go now.
Yes, ma'am. So
and deal with the people that you have to deal with.
That's right. And I learned it. So God took me through so much from coming out of New York and then even in my travels before I really got fully engaged with this. I did seven tours in Africa. So I've been there 7 times. And when the AIDS epidemic was at its highest peak in Africa, I was there, working and helping people, trying to get the older folk, which doctors was telling them to have sex with their little virgin children, and that would get the AIDS off, the virus off of them. And so going administering and rescuing kids. I've been in the streets of Philadelphia, slept in the streets of Philadelphia, to learn and kind of study people even deeper that were out there, that was lost and didn't know Christ, how to reach them, So it's not like I was flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't know it then, but God was taking me through and teaching me. And I've seen some of the worst things. In Philly one day, about 1 o'clock in the daytime, I watched a man get shot 22 times, maybe about 20 feet away from me. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Broad, nothing I could. And when he hit the ground, the 2 guys reloaded their guns and began to shoot him again. And I couldn't do anything to stop it. And I also asked God, why did you allow me to see that?
Yeah.
Why? And I didn't understand it. And they didn't allow the man to get killed. That's not what God's purpose was. So some people say everybody died at their time. I'm not a believer of that. I believe some people go before their time. If you say that, then you like God provokes all this evil that going and kill these young people. No, it's not their time. But because it happened and God used it in my life to mold me to have a better understanding of the evil that's in the world, because there is evil in the world, and that I will be careful while I'm out here doing the things that I do, right? Because there are some people, and people say, well, Pastor Chris, how can you say that? I said, remember Pharaoh. You ever hear the story about Pharaoh being saved? No, them plagues overtook him. He was just evil. God used his evil, So there are evil people in the world. I don't like people study your word of God. And so God made me recognize that Chris, the reality of it is, he is God's will that none would perish, right? He don't want us to perish. But the reality of it is that some will.
Yeah, some will.
And so I have to be careful. And it made me understand that I can speak a word, I can feed, I can help, I can try to lead people, but it's up to them.
Yeah.
I can't get my heart all down into it with one person when they don't want it, when they don't come to it. I
Right.
have to understand, I have to say, okay, leave the rest to God. And maybe when I get the glory to God, I say, you know, that day you was crying over that guy, you couldn't win him. But there he is right there. He made it. It took him 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years later, he made it.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Pastor Chris, it has been an honor and a joy to talk to you. Um, Tell us right quick again your ministries under your nonprofit.
On our nonprofit, we have a trafficking ministry we just started. We're excited about raising funds for. We have a gang intervention program we call TEI, Transition Employment Initiative, where we work with young people to help them get employment and transition their minds to do better in their life. And then we have what we call the Bread of Life. And the Bread of Life feeds more than 3,000 families a month in the city and partners with a lot of organizations, about 30 different organizations that we help in the city. And then we have our nutrition program along with our gym, where we do youth camps there, bringing young kids in that possibly might be bullied, not teaching them how to fight, but making them where they have self-esteem, hold their heads up because they feel good about themselves. And
Right.
then not the Target. And am I leaving anything out? And the Galley grocery store, which we say is convenient as a convenience store, where prices low as a grocery store and a safe place for our elderly and our Hispanic and those African American people to shop that want to feel safe.
Thank you so much. You are doing a wonderful job. May God continue to bless you and your ministry. And thank you so much. I wish you love, peace, and joy. And I'll see you soon. But
All
thank
right.
you so much for coming on, Pastor Chris. I'll let you get back to your busy day.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Be blessed.
Bye bye. You too.